So you never peddled influence as he described tonight? You never peddled influence as Governor Romney accused you of tonight?
You know, there's a point in this process where it gets unnecessarily personal and nasty, and that's sad. The fact is, I've had a very long career of trying to represent the people of Georgia, and as Speaker, the people of the United States. I think it's pretty clear to say that I have never, ever gone and done any lobbying. In fact, we brought in an expert on lobbying law and trained all of our staff, and that expert is prepared to testify that he was brought in to say, here is how the bright line between what you can do as a citizen and what you do as a lobbyist. And we consistently, for 12 years running 4 small businesses, stayed away from lobbying precisely because I thought this kind of defamatory and factually false charge would be made.
Well, Mr. Speaker, you were on this stage at a prior debate. You said you were paid $300,000 by Freddie Mac as an historian. They don't pay people $25,000 a month for 6 years as historians. That adds up to about $1.6 million. They weren't hiring you as an historian, and this contract proves that you were not an historian. You were a consultant. It doesn't say that you provided historical experience. It said that you were as a consultant, and you were hired by the chief lobbyist of Freddie Mac, not the CEO, not the head of public affairs, by the chief lobbyist of Freddie Mac. You also spoke publicly in favor of these GSEs, these government-sponsored entities, at a very time when Freddie Mac was getting America in a position where we'd have a massive housing collapse. You could have spoken out aggressively. You could have spoken out a way to say these guys are wrong, this needs to end, but instead you were being paid by them. You were making over $1 million. At the same time, people in Florida were being hurt by millions of dollars.
This is a good example, though. As a businessman, you know that the gross revenue of Bain wasn't your personal income. We had a company. The company had 3 offices. The company was being paid. My share annually was about $35,000 a year. And the fact is, I offered strategic advice, largely based on my knowledge of history, including the history of Washington. Government-sponsored enterprises include, for example, telephone cooperatives, rural electric cooperatives, federal credit unions. There are many different kinds of government-sponsored enterprises, and many of them have done very good things. And in the early years, before some people, particularly Jim Johnson and other Democrats, began to change the model, you could make a pretty good argument that in the early years, those housing institutions were responsible for a lot of people getting a lot of good housing.
There's no question about that, but we're talking about one. We're talking about Freddie Mac.
Right.
And that one did a lot of bad for a lot of people. And you were working there, making over $1 million for your entities controlled and owned by you. Owned by you. I don't know whether 100% owned by you, but I presume. Owned by you, over $1.6 million. And you said it was $300,000. It was $1.6 million. So Matt, that's a difference.
Matt, what's the gross revenue of Bain in the years you were associated with it? What's the gross revenue?
Very substantial, but I think it's irrelevant compared to the fact that you were working for Freddie Mac.
Wait a second.
You were working
very
for
substantial. Did Bain ever do any work with any company which did any work with the government, like Medicare?
We didn't do any work with the government. I didn't have an office in K Street. I wasn't a lobbyist. I've never worked in Washington. You were working there. We have congressmen who also say that you came and lobbied them in favor.
I didn't lobby them.
You have congressmen who say that you came and lobbied them with regards to Medicare Part D. At the same time, your center was taking in contributions.
You just jumped a long way over here, friend.
Well, another area of influence peddling.
No, not, let me be very clear, because I understand your technique, which you used on McCain, you used on Huckabee, you used consistently. Okay, it's unfortunate, and it's not going to work very well because the American people see through it. I have always publicly favored a stronger Medicare program. I wrote a book in 2002 called Saving Lives and Saving Money. I publicly favored Medicare Part D for a practical reason. And that reason is simple. The U.S. government was not prepared to give people anything, insulin, for example, but they would pay for kidney dialysis. They weren't prepared to give people Lipitor, but they'd pay for open heart surgery. That is a terrible way to run Medicare. I am proud of the fact, and I'll say this in Florida, I'm proud of the fact that I publicly, openly advocated Medicare Part D. It has saved lives. It's run on a free enterprise model. It also includes health savings accounts, and it includes Medicare alternatives, which gave people choices. And I did it publicly, and it is not correct, Mitt. I'm just saying this flatly because you've been walking around this state saying things that are untrue. It is not correct to describe public citizenship, having public advocacy as lobbying. Every citizen has the right to do that. And what I did on behalf of Medicare, I did out in the open, publicly, and that is my right as a citizen.
Here's why it's a problem, Mr. Speaker. Here's why it's a problem. And that is, if you're getting paid by health companies, if your entities are getting paid by health companies that could benefit from a piece of legislation, and you then meet with Republican congressmen and encourage them to support that legislation, you can call it whatever you'd like. I call it influence peddling. It is not right. It is not right. You have a conflict. You are being paid by companies. At the same time, you're encouraging people to pass legislation which is in their favor.
Governor.
You spent now 15 years in Washington on K Street, and this is a real problem if we're going to nominate someone who not only had a record of great distress as the Speaker, but then has worked for 15 years.
Gentlemen, we've let this
lobbying.
go because of the state of the race, and a certain amount of this conversation, I guess, had to happen. This also has to happen. We have to go to a break. We'll come back.